My mother pinned my arms as my father sealed the deal, wedding me to a man old enough to be my grandfather. My only choice was to run, leaving them to face the consequences. Years have passed and now she's ill, pleading for my return because we're supposedly family. In the world I grew up in, a girl's first blood marked her as ready for marriage. It made no difference if you were a child of 12 or 13, you were old enough for a husband 3 times your senior. This was the reality I was raised to accept, and it never struck me as particularly monstrous until my 11th year. That was when I witnessed my cousin Mayam, just 3 days after her own monarch, being promised to a man of 43 whose 2 previous wives had both perished before their 20th birthdays. That was the evening I began to deliberately starve myself. It wasn't about body image or a dislike of food. I had simply observed that the thinnest girls in our community were the last to begin their cycles, and I recognized this as my only path to stalling my fate. I would later understand the biological necessity of body fat for puberty to even begin. While other girls taunted me with names like skeleton, I was unmoved. My peers were already betrothed to men with children older than we were. This didn't halt my own training to become a perfect wife. Every Friday, from the pre-dawn hours until late morning, I was required to serve the male members of our family, a silent, tireless servant. Any eye contact, any sound would earn me 10 sharp lashes from a leather belt. They forced me to handle scorching pots with my bare hands, a method for hardening what they called my soft kitchen hands. Each night, my mother would meticulously apply skin-whitening creams to my face, ensuring I would be a beautiful prize. Apart from my secret campaign of starvation, I was the model daughter. I performed my role without a single complaint, often speaking of my eagerness to be married and have children. But at 14, with my body still prepubescent, I stumbled upon a truth that unraveled my entire world. It's important to note we were living in the United States this entire time, but my mother had convinced us that our way of life was normal, and that any girl who strayed from it was doomed to die alone, ugly, and worthless. My awakening came after a teacher, alarmed by my emaciated frame glimpsed through a t-shirt I'd worn by mistake, insisted on a meeting. During a moment, she stepped out to use the restroom. She left a desk drawer unlocked. Inside, I found books on marriage laws and pamphlets with titles like Your Rights as a Teenager and When Culture Becomes Crime. As I scanned the pages, my understanding of reality shifted. For the first time, I was introduced to the concept that marriage before 18 was illegal and wrong, with no exceptions for culture or parental permission. I stole the slenderest booklet, tucking it into the waistband of my skirt. Over the following weeks, while my parents believed I was sleeping, I committed every word to memory: phone numbers for child protective services, addresses for shelters, and the precise legal phrases that would compel an official report. I learned that teachers, counselors, and doctors were all mandated by law to report any suspicion of abuse. Armed with this dangerous knowledge, I started a secret wife skills group in my uncle's dusty tool shed. My students were 6 of my younger cousins, all of them yet to bleed, all of them desperate to evade the future laid out for them. There, in hushed tones, I taught them what I had learned. We identified which teachers were mandated reporters and practiced the words that would trigger an investigation. "They are forcing me to marry," we would whisper. "I'm only 13. Please, you have to help me." At 15, my own body betrayed me. The blood came during the morning food service, a crimson stain spreading across my white dress. My mother's shriek was one of triumph, bringing all the women of the house running. They beamed, kissing my cheeks and telling me how fortunate I was. By nightfall, my father had selected my husband, Hamoud Habibi, a construction tycoon who had already buried 2 wives by the time they turned 23. The death certificate cited kidney failure, but the women whispered that it was from too many pregnancies too soon. 2 days later, my cousin Anna, one of the girls from the shed, got her period. Within hours, she was promised to a 51-year-old who collected young wives like Art, a man who already had 8 children older than she was. I saw the light extinguish from her eyes as they haggled over her bride price as if she were cattle. That night, I slipped her my notebook filled with every shelter number, legal statute, and escape plan I had memorized. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "find the science teacher, use the exact words." Her hands trembled as she took the notebook. "But what about you?" she asked. My wedding isn't for 2 more weeks. I'll find a way, I lied, my own voice shaking. But I was mistaken. Later that night, there was a knock on our door. It was CPS. I saw my father's expression morph from confusion to cold fury as they inquired about Anna, about underage brides and forced marriages. They needed to interview all the girls in the family under 18. The moment the investigators left, the family descended on me like a pack of wolves. In their minds, someone had been poisoning the girls with Western lies. They ransacked the house searching for the source of this corruption. It took them less than an hour to find my journal hidden in the tool shed, its pages filled with forbidden phone numbers and legal codes. My father burned it in the fireplace as the family watched, calling me diseased, contaminated, and a cancer that had to be excised. The wedding is tomorrow, he declared, before she can ruin anyone else. Dawn broke far too quickly. Soon, they would come to adorn me in red and gold and deliver me to a man who had already seen 2 young women to their graves. As footsteps approached my bedroom, my stomach twisted in knots. I grabbed a small plastic bag I'd hidden weeks prior, containing only a change of clothes, the shelter addresses I'd rewritten from memory, and $20 I'd pilfered from my mother's purse. $1 at a time, the doorknob turned. I clutched my stomach, doubling over with a groan that was only partly feigned. My mother swept in, already dressed in her celebratory finery. Get up, she ordered. The beautician will be here in 30 minutes. I moaned louder, pressing my hands to my abdomen. Mama, something is terribly wrong. She eyed me with suspicion. In our culture, a sick bride was a terrible omen. What did you eat? She demanded. Nothing, I gasped, stumbling toward the door. I need the bathroom. Now, she seized my arm. You just went 20 minutes ago. Please, I pleaded, letting real tears of fear stream down my face. It hurts so much. She released me with a look of disgust. 5 minutes, your aunts are waiting. I staggered down the hall, the hidden bag concealed beneath my loose nightgown. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and scrambled onto the toilet seat. The ceiling tile I'd painstakingly loosened over weeks shifted easily. I shoved the bag into the space above, then used the toilet to make convincing sounds. 3 minutes crawled by. I flushed, ran the faucet, and let out another loud groan. Mama, I can't stop. My stomach. Her fist pounded on the door. Open this door. I can't. I cried, climbing back onto the toilet. The small window above had been painted shut for years, but I had been patiently chipping away at the paint with a stolen butter knife. Please, just another minute. More pounding, now accompanied by the voices of my aunts. I threw my entire weight against the window frame. The old paint cracked, then shattered, and cool morning air rushed in. The opening was designed for ventilation, not escape, but my months of starvation had made me just small enough. She's taking too long. My father's voice boomed from the hall. Break it down. I grabbed my bag from the ceiling, shoved it through the window, and then began to pull myself up, my shoulders scraping raw against the frame. The bathroom door shuddered as they slammed against it. My hips caught. I bit my tongue to stifle a cry, twisting my body sideways. The lock splintered just as my legs cleared the opening. I fell 6 feet to the wet grass below, my ankle twisting painfully but not breaking. Behind me, shouts erupted from the house. I ran, barefoot and desperate, my nightgown flapping around me. I sprinted across our lawn and into the neighboring yard. Dogs began to bark, and motion lights flickered to life. I didn't stop. Our neighborhood was a labyrinth of identical houses, all filled with families from our community who would return me without a second thought. I darted through yards, past pools and garden sheds. A car engine roared to life behind me, then a second. They had mobilized quickly. I dove behind a set of garbage bins as headlights swept across the street. My cousin Omar's voice cut through the early morning air. Check every street. She couldn't have gotten far. The main road and its bus stop were 3 blocks away. I had traced this route in my mind 100 times, but never like this, with my heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst. I weaved between houses, using parked cars for cover. My feet left bloody prints on the pavement. A shard of glass lodged itself in my heel, but I couldn't afford to stop. Another shout came from my left, and a car screeched around the corner. I threw myself into a neighbor's thorny rose bushes, the thorns tearing at my gown and skin. I limped through her backyard and into the alley behind it. Just as the morning bus pulled up to the stop, I burst out from between two buildings, waving my arms frantically. The driver, an older black woman, took one look at my torn, bloody state and held the door open. I climbed the steps and froze. I had no money. In my panic, the $20 was still in the bag. "Please," I whispered. "I just need to get downtown." An elderly woman in the front seat stood and fed exact change into the machine. "Sit down, child," she said softly, guiding me to a seat and handing me tissues. As the bus pulled away, Omar's car skidded into the bus stop's lot. I ducked below the window, but not before seeing the rage contorting his face. The courthouse was a formidable building I'd only ever seen from a distance. I limped past security, leaving bloody tracks on the marble floor. A clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, saw me and immediately came around her desk. "Honey, do you need a doctor? An emergency protective order?" I choked out the words I had memorized. "I'm 15. They're forcing me to marry him today. Please." She helped me into a chair and handed me forms. As I filled them out, reciting the shelter's address from memory, my phone, forgotten in my bag, began to ring. Mom, Dad, Omar, unknown numbers. I ignored them all. The clerk's face grew more grim as I detailed the dead wives and the ceremony scheduled for that day. She disappeared and returned with a judge who read my petition on the spot. "Granted," he said. "Emergency order is effective immediately." I clutched the papers and limped back into the city. The shelter was 12 blocks away, but a phone call confirmed my worst fear. They were full. I was stranded. That's when I remembered Ms. Rodriguez, my teacher. Perhaps she hadn't forgotten to lock that drawer at all. I found her in her empty classroom on a Saturday, grading papers. She looked up and dropped her pen. Oh my God, she was at my side in an instant, taking in my mangled feet, torn gown, and the court order in my fist. As she cleaned the glass from my heel with the school's first aid kit, I finally broke down and cried. They were going to make me marry him. I sobbed. "The shelter's full, and I have nowhere to go." She immediately called the CPS emergency line, but the response was discouraging. A protective order based on claims wasn't enough. Without evidence of recent physical harm, their hands were tied. My phone rang again. This time, Ms. Rodriguez answered. Her face went pale. "Mr. Habibi? No, your daughter isn't." "What?" I heard my father's calm, reasonable business voice, explaining that I was mentally unwell, that I needed my medication. They were tracking my phone. As I frantically wiped my phone, we heard car doors slam in the parking lot. Ms. Rodriguez locked the door and drew the blinds. Footsteps echoed in the hall. "We know she's in there." My father called out. "She's sick." They began to pound on the door. "Wait," I said, grabbing my teacher's hand before she could call 911. I showed her everything, the circular burn scars on my arms from pot training, the fresh bruises from that morning's struggle, the old belt marks across my back. Her hands shook as she photographed the injuries with her phone. "Why didn't you show anyone?" she whispered. "I thought it was normal," I admitted, "until I read your pamphlets." She called 911 then, reporting men trying to break into her classroom. The pounding intensified, then my uncle's voice. "We have her medication. She's schizophrenic. She makes things up." By the time the police arrived, my father had transformed into a concerned parent, holding prescription bottles with my name on them. "Thank God you're here," he told the officers. "My daughter has delusions." The officers separated us. "The cuts could be self-inflicted," one told Ms. Rodriguez. "Check when those prescriptions were filled," I blurted out. "If I'm so sick, where are the doctor visits? The therapy records?" Ms. Rodriguez pulled out her laptop, showing them months of my essays, where I had hidden the truth in plain sight, describing traditional cooking lessons instead of burns, and marriage preparations instead of beatings. Then, school security arrived with footage of my father and uncles getting out of their car already holding the prescription bottles. My father's composure finally cracked. As the CPS supervisor declared they were placing me in emergency protective custody, he lunged toward me, screaming curses in Arabic. The emergency placement coordinator, a tired woman named Margaret, took one look at my feet and called for medical transport. At the hospital, chaos reigned. A nurse cleaned and stitched my wounds while Margaret made call after call, trying to find a safe place for me. Every specialized foster home was full. Families often try to retrieve the girls, she explained grimly. We need somewhere secure. As the doctor injected anesthetic to remove the last shard of glass from my heel, Margaret tried to pull up my official records to process the CPS paperwork. She paused, frowning at her screen. That's odd, she murmured. There's a flag on your birth certificate. She made another call, her voice low and urgent. 20 minutes later, she returned with a grave expression, closing the curtain around my bed. She sat down, taking a deep breath. There's something you need to know, she began, her voice gentle. The people who raised you, they are not your biological parents. The world tilted on its axis, the sterile scent of the hospital, the sting in my foot, it all faded away. What? I whispered. According to these documents? Margaret said, holding up a file. You were part of a private, sealed arrangement at birth. They aren't your family. They acquired you. She explained that the paperwork was less like an adoption and more like a contract. It was a business deal. They had raised me for one purpose, to be the perfect, custom-made bride for Hamid Habibi, a contractual obligation to seal a partnership between the two families. I was not a daughter, I was an asset. And then she delivered the final earth-shattering blow. There's more, she said softly. There's a missing persons report filed 15 years ago that matches your birth details perfectly. Your real parents, they've been looking for you this whole time. The news didn't just break my heart, it pulverized my entire identity. The abuse, the training, the terror wasn't family dysfunction, it was the calculated grooming of an investment. Ms. Rodriguez found a retired nurse, Theodora Whitman, who was certified for emergency placements and had experience with cultural transition cases. Theodora's home was a fortress, with cameras, a tall fence, and alarms on the windows. For the first time in my life, I had a lock on the inside of my door. That first night, I couldn't sleep. Theodora found me staring out the window at 3 a.m. They came for the last girl, too. She said quietly. Stood right at that gate demanding I return their property. The police response time to this address is under 2 minutes, I made sure of it. The next few weeks were a blur of safety planning and legal battles. Margaret connected me with a fierce legal aid lawyer named Patricia. When I told her about the discovery at the hospital, her eyes lit up with a cold fire. This changes everything, she said. This isn't a custody battle over parental rights. This is kidnapping. They have no legal claim to you whatsoever. The harassment from the family who raised me intensified. They couldn't contact me, so they sent flowers with cards signed Love, Mama, and tried to get my new school records. Patricia used every attempt as evidence. But their primary weapon became a public campaign. My photo appeared on Facebook with pleas to find their mentally ill daughter. They even coerced my cousin Margie, one of the girls from the shed, to record a video, her eyes vacant as she recited a script about how I had lied and tried to turn her against our beautiful culture. The pain of that betrayal was a physical blow. Then came the court hearing for the permanent protective order. The people who raised me filled one side of the room, their lawyer painting a picture of a loving family torn apart by a troubled, manipulative girl. But when Patricia's turn came, she dismantled their entire case. She presented the photos of my injuries, the essays, the security footage. And then she presented the hospital records and the sealed birth contract. Your Honor, she declared, these people are not my client's parents, they are her captors. Their claim of parental rights is fraudulent. A shocked murmur went through the court. My father's face went ashen. Just as he began to object, the courtroom doors opened. A young woman I didn't recognize entered, flanked by a CPS worker. Your Honor, the worker said, this witness has relevant information. The woman took the stand. My name is Fatima Habibi, she said. I was Hamid Habibi's first wife. I didn't. The courtroom erupted. Fatima told her story, the forced pregnancies, the kidney failure, and the hospital nurse who helped her escape into a new identity while her family erected a fake grave. When I saw the posts about this girl, Fatima said, looking at me, I couldn't let him do it again. Her testimony, combined with the revelation of my true identity, was irrefutable. The judge granted the permanent protective order and ordered a criminal investigation into my abduction. As we left, the man who had called himself my father stood up. You are dead to us. He hissed in Arabic. We have no daughter, the woman beside him added, her voice ringing through the silent room. The words that once would have shattered me now felt hollow. They weren't rejecting a daughter, they were writing off a failed business deal. Outside, Fatima hugged me. "You're not alone," she whispered. "The fight wasn't over." They tried to bankrupt us with civil lawsuits and used other girls to post videos accusing me of being a predator who corrupted them. There was a break-in at Theodora's house, forcing me to move to a new safe house, an apartment above a retired police officer's garage, but their desperation was backfiring. With Ms. Rodriguez's help, I created information packets, legal rights disguised as homework, shelter numbers hidden in math problems. We started a network and girls began to find them. One night, I got a call from 6 girls who had found a packet and needed help. A journalist wrote a story protecting our identities but exposing the truth. It went viral, and my family's story about a sick runaway was drowned out by a wave of support and similar stories from other escapees. My family's final move was to formally disown me in a public community notice, erasing my name and threatening anyone who spoke to me. They thought it would be the ultimate punishment, a social death. Instead, it was liberating. It showed every other girl watching that their worst threat was survivable. The trickle of girls seeking help became a flood. We formalized our network, calling it the Freedom Network, with volunteers, safe houses, and legal backing. I walked into my final court hearing not to face my captors, but to a room filled with supporters: Fatima, Miss Rodriguez, Theodora, and other girls who had found their way out. The order was renewed without question. That night my phone rang. Another unknown number, another young voice trembling with fear and hope. "I found your notebook," she whispered. "Can you help me?" Beside me on the nightstand was a file Margaret had given me, containing the first official contact from the private investigator my birth parents had hired. It had their photo inside. "Yes," I said into the phone, grabbing a pen. "Tell me everything." As she spoke, I knew the war was far from over. My captors had erased me from their lives, but in doing so, they had allowed me to become something they could never control, proof that their daughters could choose a different life. That knowledge was now spreading, a whispered promise in hidden notebooks, carried by brave girls fighting for the right to exist as more than just a bargain. I was helping this girl find her freedom, while on my own desk lay the first map leading back to the family I never knew I had.